And we're back. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pesach Pearls. And I know I say this every time, but this is like my favorite one. So buckle in. It's going to be an amazing ride. And for those of you who tuned in yesterday to the Amazing Hearts Power Hour, we're going to recap a bit on what my wife and I spoke there. But we're going to sort of put it in a bit of a framework and develop it further. So if you're at the Hearts Power Hour, we're going to go over the amazing stuff that was said, and then we're going to develop it, and it's going to become even more magical and even more incredible. Hold tight. So we're going to start. I think Pesach really starts, in a sense, this week. It's this Shabbos. Shabbos Hagadol, Shabbat Hagadol. Anyone, any ideas on why we call it Shabbat Hagadol? This is the big Shabbos. There's only one in the whole year, the big Shabbos, and it's this Shabbos. Any clue? Anyone know why it's called Shabbat Hagadol? Any thoughts? Oh, well, what do you know? Every year before Pesach, the Shabbos for Pesach or Shabbos Hagadol, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. Here, look at this. Here we go. Right. So stage one of freedom. This is what we're going to do. Stage one of freedom facing the dragon. So the Torah in Orach Chaim, Siman 430, says this. It says the Shabbos before Pesach is called Shabbos HaGadol, right? And what's the reason? There was a massive miracle that happened on this Shabbos. Now, what was it? So this Shabbos, Hashem told the Jewish people that they have to take a lamb. And Nimsa, Sheyud B'Chodesh, this 10th of the month that the Pasuk is talking about, Hoya Shabbos, it was the Shabbos, and it's this Shabbos coming up. And each Jew took a lamb for his Korban Pesach, his Paschal lamb offering, and he tied it to the leg of his bed. And the Mitzrayim asked all the Jews, what are you doing taking a lamb and tying it to your bed? It was a strange thing to do. The Jews answered the Egyptians, we're shechting it, we're shechting this, we're slaughtering this lamb because Hashem wants us to do it. And the Egyptians were infuriated because this lamb is the god of the Egyptians. And what the Jews are doing is, in their eyes, an extremely disrespectful act to their deity. They're taking the lamb, the god of the Egyptians, they're tying it to their bedpost, announcing that we're going to slaughter it in 2 weeks' time and then eat it. But these aggravated and infuriated Egyptians, they couldn't say a single thing back. And because of this miracle that the Egyptians couldn't answer back, they called it Shabbos Hagadol. Now let me ask you, there were many incredible miracles that happened throughout the Exodus, throughout the Jewish people leaving Egypt. This is the one that gets its own Shabbos. This is the one that Shabbos Hagadol. This is the big one, folks. And what was it? A bunch of Egyptians that were restrained in a maybe more than natural way. This is it, guys, the Shabbos Hagadol. Because the Egyptians just couldn't answer back. There must be something going on here. There must be something that we're missing. And I think what we're missing here, what we're missing from our understanding of Shabbos Hagadol, is a kid's book called There's No Such Thing as a Dragon. Who's heard of There's No Such Thing as a Dragon? Oh, Jeff Rubenstein's heard it because he was here yesterday. So there's no such thing as a dragon, guys. Tune in. I'm just going to share the new screen here with you. Ready, set, go. 3.5 minutes, buckle up.
There's no such thing as a dragon.
Can you hear?
Billy Bixby was rather surprised when he woke up one morning and found a dragon in his room. It was a small dragon, about the size of a kitten. The dragon wagged its tail happily when Billy patted its head. Billy went downstairs to tell his mother.
There's no such thing as a dragon,
said Billy's mother, and she said it like she meant it. Billy went back to his room and began to dress. The dragon came close to Billy and wagged its tail, but Billy didn't pat it. If there's no such thing as something, it's silly to pat it on the head. Billy washed his face and hands and went down to breakfast. The dragon went along. It was bigger now, almost the size of a dog. Billy sat down at the table. The dragon sat down on the table. This sort of thing was not usually permitted, but there wasn't much Billy's mother could do about it. She'd already said that there was no such thing as a dragon, and if there's no such thing, you can't tell it to get off the table. Mother made some pancakes for Billy, but the dragon ate them all. Mother made some more, but the dragon ate those too. Mother kept making pancakes until she ran out of batter. Billy only got one of them, but he said that's all he really wanted anyway. Billy went upstairs to brush his teeth. Mother started clearing the table. The dragon, who was quite as big as Mother by this time, made himself comfortable on the hall rug and went to sleep. By the time Billy came back downstairs, the dragon had grown so much he filled the hall. Billy had to go around by way of the living room to get to where his mother was.
I didn't know dragons grew so fast,
said Billy.
There's no such thing as a dragon,
said his mother firmly. Cleaning the downstairs took Mother all morning, what with that dragon in the way and having to climb in and out of windows to get from room to room. By noon, the dragon filled the house. Its head hung out the front door, its tail hung out the back door, and there wasn't a room in the house that didn't have some part of the dragon in it. When the dragon awoke from his nap, he was hungry. A bakery truck went by. The smell of fresh bread was more than the dragon could resist. The dragon ran down the street after the bakery truck. The house went along, of course, like a shell on a snail. The mailman was just coming up the path with some mail for the Bixbys when their house rushed past him and headed down the street. He chased the Bixby's house for a few blocks, but he couldn't catch it. When Mr. Bixby came home for lunch, the first thing he noticed was that the house was gone. Luckily, one of the neighbors was able to tell him which way it went. Mr. Bixby got in his car and went looking for the house. He studied all the houses as he drove along. Finally, he saw one that looked familiar. Billy and Mrs. Bixby were waving from an upstairs window. Mr. Bixby climbed over the dragon's head, onto the porch roof, and through the upstairs window.
How did this happen?
Mr. Bixby asked.
it was the dragon.
Said Billy.
There's no such thing as...
Mother started to say.
There is a dragon.
Billy insisted.
A very big dragon.
And Billy patted the dragon on the head. The dragon wagged its tail happily. Then, even faster than it had grown, the dragon started getting smaller. Soon it was kitten size again.
I don't mind dragons this size. Why did it have to grow so big?
Said Mother.
I'm not sure, but I think it just wanted to be noticed.
Said Billy. The end.
So that's the story, guys. That's the story of the dragon. And I've called the stage 1 of freedom that we're dealing with on this Shabbos Hagadol, facing the dragon, because I think the story is very deep. The story is very deep. There's a dragon, and we all have dragons in our lives.
How do dinosaurs go?
We all have issues and struggles and dragons and problems and demons in our lives. And if we ignore them, they might start off kitten-sized, but they start to get bigger. They start to fill every room of the house. They start to shift the entire house down the block to places that it's never been. It had no right to be. And a husband, a father can come home from work one day and find that the entire house is missing because no one's willing to admit that there's such thing as a dragon, there's such thing as a problem. And listen, those words at the end of the story are so powerful. He says, I just think the dragon wanted to be noticed. And if we ignore and deny the dragons and problems in our lives, they just get bigger. But when we turn and face them, suddenly they're half the size we thought they were. They're not as intimidating as we thought they were, and they're much more manageable. And believe it or not, this is the message of Shabbos Hagadol. Why was it so important? And why is it such a big Shabbos Hagadol that we commemorate for the rest of time? Why is it such a big deal that the Jews took a Pesach lamb and the Egyptians couldn't do anything to touch them? And it's because of this dragon. It's true the Jews were on the verge, the brink of physical freedom. They're about to walk free as physically free humans. But there was a mental freedom that they needed to change. They'd suffered so long under the dragon of the Egyptians, 210 years of abuse, of physical hurt and slavery. And There was a mental freedom that needed to be achieved. They needed to open the cupboard and see that there's no monster there. They needed to turn around and pat that dragon on the head, recognize it, confront it, in order for it to dwindle down to a manageable issue. And this is what that taking of the lamb was. It was turning around and doing something in the face of the Egyptians and watching the Egyptians being unable to do anything about that. And it's when they saw that how powerless the Egyptians were in the face of this new Jewish nation, the Jews could achieve a mental freedom. And part of freedom, a requirement, the journey to freedom requires you to push the boundaries of your fears, of your presuppositions and your limitations. Take stock of all the things that you think are insurmountable and realize that freedom, that this newfound freedom that we get on Pesach gives us the power to not only face them, but recognize that they were half the size we thought they were in the first place. The truth is, I'm not convinced that this is an idea that's just found in Pesach. Look at this, there's a medrash in Bereshis, and it's a medrash that talks about the Satan, it talks about Satan. And if you look at it on source 2, it says, Rabbi Abba said, Hayetzer Hazeh, this Satan is compared to a weak bandit who gives off an image of being mighty by sitting at the crossroads in public and demanding from everyone who passes him on the crossroad to give him all the valuables they were carrying. But one wise person passed, and he saw that the bandit had no real ability to steal from him and started to beat him. So too, many generations from the beginning of creation were destroyed by the Satan. And the generation of Enosh, these are the people that fell and started worshipping idols. You have the generation of the Haflaga. These are the people that built the Tower of Babel, Tower of Babel. The generation of the flood in Noach's time, the world that got destroyed. All these people succumbed to this pomp and fanfare, this blown up, aggrandized image of the Satan. And it's only once Abraham came, Avraham rose and saw that the Satan had no real power and began to beat him. So stage one of freedom that we see starting from this Shabbos is you have to be able to face the dragons. You're not going to be truly free until you can turn around and face the dragons of your life. Be that people you're scared of, realizations about yourself that are uncomfortable for you. And it's only once you turn around and recognize them and realize that they're there, that they're an existential problem, and stop saying there's no such thing as a dragon, that it starts to shrink and become that kitten size it was. So Billy Bixby has taught us that stage one of freedom, Shabbos HaGadol teaches us, stage one of freedom is face the dragon. Recognize the problems and the issues in your life. Don't be afraid of them and watch them shrink as you turn and face them. So that's number one. I heard this story a while back of some elephants that were in a sanctuary zoo, whatever it was. And these big, mighty elephants, these things are, African elephants are enormous. And they were held together by these tiny pieces of rope. And there was an onlooker who said, I don't understand, these elephants are so big and so strong. They're being held together by these tiny little strings. Why don't you just break free and run off? And one of the zookeepers or whatever it was said to this spectator, he said, when they were younger and they were small elephants, we used these ropes to tie them together. And back then, they weren't strong enough to break those ropes. And they saw those ropes as something that bound them inescapably. And they grew older and never reassessed how strong they were. And those same little strings that were able to confine a baby elephant are containing a fully grown elephant, simply because they've never turned and reassessed their strengths, reassessed their limitations, and realized that freedom is now available to them. And this is exactly what the Jews did. Those same strings that held them as slaves for 210 years, they had to realize couldn't hold them anymore. They're a new entity. They're not freed slaves. They're a free nation. They're a free people. They're a free group of individuals that are their own masters. That's what had to happen, but not only happen, that's what the Jews had to realize. This is what happens on Shabbos HaGadol. This is what we commemorate on Shabbos HaGadol. It's the fact that we can turn and break through issues, break through problems that were previously just too strong for us. It's a very empowering time. So stage one of freedom is face the dragon. But now we move on to stage two of freedom. Stage two of freedom is let it go. And some of you will probably have a certain song going through your minds right now, but it's not what you think it is. Stage two of freedom is the eagle's wings. Now, this really starts with two Buddhist monks. There's two Buddhist monks. They're going on a journey, and they've got a long way to go. They get to a massive river, and it's a gushing torrent of a thing. And being strong young men that they were able to wade across the river no problem. But there was a frail person, a frail lady, who was sitting on the one bank of the river, and she couldn't cross by herself, and she was clearly waiting for someone to help her. So one of the monks, kindly soul that he put this lady on his shoulders, he waded across the river, put her down on the other side, and went on his way. And his friend, the monk's friend who was traveling with him, also a monk, was furious, absolutely livid, and he refused to speak to his friend who had helped that lady the rest of the day. And they get to their campsite that night, and the monk who had helped the lady across the river says to his friend, "Why are you so upset with me? I mean, you haven't spoken to me the whole day. Is everything okay?" And his friend burst out furiously. He says, "You know exactly why I'm upset. You know that as Buddhist monks, we have a rule that we don't touch women. And there you are, blatantly flaunting our code of conduct in front of my face. Have you no respect for me? Have you no respect for our way of life? You're touching women. What is this? How dare you?" And his friend who had helped that lady, he smiled at his friend who was just shouting so furiously, and with a twinkle in his eye that wasn't just from the fire in between them. He said, "It's true that I may have done something wrong, and I may have helped that lady across the river in a contravening our laws. But I put her down on the other side of that river. And you, my friend, you've been carrying her all day." And this is such a powerful message, because it's true that guilt and remorse and regret have a place and have a time and a place. You know, they're designed, they're supposed to be productive agents that help us keep track and keep a sensitivity and awareness of things we've done wrong and move to rectify them. That's what guilt and remorse are supposed to do. But there comes a time when guilt and remorse don't have a place anymore. They're not productive. They're not helping us rectify our mistakes, but they're just serving to weigh us down and stop us moving forward. And it's at that point, we have to let go and put down all these things that we're beating ourselves up about and leave them behind. You know, historically, Nisan is a time of freedom. It's the month where the Jewish people left Egypt historically in an incredible, mind-blowing, globally unprecedented way. But Chazal, Jewish wisdom, tell us that it's not just a historical time of freedom. It's a future time of freedom as well. Moshiach, the coming of the Messiah, the Gemara, the Chazal tell us, is going to happen in Nisan. And you've definitely heard this, but there's this idea that we're going to move forward to that new enlightened time, that time of peace and tranquility, of spirituality, on eagle's wings. We're going to move there on eagle's wings. And it bothered me for a while. I mean, what's the significance of eagle's wings? We can move forward on peregrine falcon's wings. You know, those things are the fastest animals on land. So let's go on, that's quicker. Or maybe angel's wings, you know, that's spiritual. What's the big deal about an eagle? And the Kedushas Levi, he says that the word nesher, meaning eagle, is used to describe our progress into freedom, because that same word nesher, nun shin reish, also spells noisher, which means to shed. And he says that our freedom in the future is going to be predicated on the ability to shed ourselves. Noisher meaning to shed, meaning to rid yourself of unhealthy excess baggage, whether it's feathers, whether it's skin, whatever it is. But that future freedom is predicated on the ability for the Jewish people to leave the former selves behind. And yeah, we might have things that we've done wrong, and there's things we've made, mistakes we've made, and maybe even people we've hurt, and we should move to rectify that. But there comes a point when you have to let go. You have to become that eagle, shed the feathers that are no longer productive and healthy, and move forward into a new redeemed future. And the truth is, while this is a message for the month of Nisan, while this is a message for Pesach about redemption, moving forward, being part of the key to our new, better future, we say it every single day in Mariv, in the evening prayers. Look at this. We say, Hashkivenu Hashem Elokeinu l'shalom. Please, Hashem, lay us down to sleep in peace. V'saknenu bi'eksatova milfonecha, and direct us to better ourselves through your good counsel. V'hogein ba'adenu, and shield us. And then we say something so strange. Every day in Maariv, we say, V'hoser me'olenu, and remove from us oyev dever v'chev v'rav v'yagon, and remove from us, pestilence and plague and all these horrible things. V'hoser soton, and remove the Satan, milfanenu ume'achareinu, from in front of us and from behind us. Now let me break this down for a minute, 1 second. I don't want Satan in front of me. I understand that's a pain. I'm trying to move forward. I'm trying to move forward to a new goal, maybe a new level of Jewish observance. I'm trying to perfect myself and become a new person. All these things are in my future plans. I want to get there, and comes along Satan and he acts as an obstacle and he obstructs me. He gets in the way. He slows me down. He distracts me, whatever it is. I get it. The Satan in front of me, that's a pain. But then we're talking about a Satan that's also behind us. Now let me ask you, I don't really care if the Satan's behind me. I'm going this way. So he can stay there. Firstly, what's he doing there? And secondly, why is it so important that we ask Hashem to remove him from behind us? Satan that's behind me, I don't care. Why does that bother me? And I heard the most mind-blowing answer. Because it's true there's a Satan that stands in front of us and he tries to get in our way and he tries to block us going to the places we want to go and the people that we want to be. But there's a Satan that stands behind us. He says, you want to go forward. You want to progress. You want to develop yourself. You want to become a better person. Go for it. B'chavod. Be my guest. But do you remember last week when you upset that person? And do you remember when you got angry and you said that? And do you remember when you said that you were going to work on yourself in that way, but it really ended up badly? So you can move forward. I don't mind if you move forward, but just remember the things in your past. Remember who you really are. And you can go and try and kid yourself that you'll be something better, but remember what you did yesterday. Remember what you did last week. And that is an evil, capricious, and malicious Satan that stands behind us and doesn't let us let go of the things that are no longer productive, the things that we can't change. And we ask God to be freed from that evil whispering in our ear that says, you will never progress and you will never be better because of what you did in the past. There comes a time when we break free, we put that lady down on the other side of the river and move on. And there's a Satan that's so desperate to stop us from moving on, from stopping us from detaching from our past, simply because he knows how powerful that is. The Satan knows the message of the eagle's wings. He knows that redemption in the future is going to come, and it's going to be due to the fact that the Jewish people can shed those feathers, can shed their former selves. He knows how powerful that is. And he's so desperate to keep us caged in the past that is no longer constructive and we can do nothing about. So stage number 2 of freedom is the eagle's wings. It's be able to let go of the things that you can't do anything about. So in stage 1 of freedom, we said face the dragon. We said there are things that we are scared of. There are things that we think we can't overcome, things that we've been caged by for so long. But there comes a time like those elephants where we need to reassess our strengths and realize that which held us back in the past might not be a barrier, might not be a boundary anymore. So face the dragon. But there are some dragons, no matter how much we face, no matter how much we shrink down, sometimes we just need to let them go. Sometimes there's nothing we can do about that dragon anymore. Sometimes we need to put that dragon on the other side of the river and move on. And that's stage 2 of freedom. So these are the first 2 stages that are prerequisites to freedom, that are the introduction to freedom. But let's talk about what happens when freedom is ours. What happens then? And this, I think, is so important. Stage 3 of now we're talking about post-freedom is called Knights of the Round Table. Some of you may get the joke, some of you won't. All right, never mind. But Knights of the Round Table, there's a very curious custom. Check this out, source number 4. This is the Ramah, the Ashkenazi halachist, who, Ashkenazi halachic practice is based on him. And he brings a very interesting custom. He says there's a custom to buy flour for poor people for their Pesach needs. Now, a lot of halachic commentators are very perplexed by this because we don't find this custom in relation to any other Yom Tov. We have ideas like tzedakah and charity. And, on Shabbos, we have this requirement to make sure that the poor are fed. But We never see such an explicit custom surrounding any other time of year where we buy flour for people for their Pesach needs. And many answers are given. But one of the most beautiful answers around this custom, I want to share with you. You know, I love how in Judaism, some of the most powerful things are hidden in the most innocuous, unsuspecting places. Check this. This is probably, on the surface of it, the least inspiring verse in the Torah you have ever seen in your life. I challenge you to find something more dull on the surface than this, and let this be a reminder. Every time you think that there's something boring going on, let this be a reminder to you of the magic and the wisdom and the gold that can be hidden in the most unsuspecting places in Jewish law and the Torah. Get this, in Shemais, we're building the tabernacle, we're creating the holy place on earth, and guess what? We have a bunch of fabrics that need to connect. They've got to connect, right? So we say to make 50 loops on the one cloth and 50 loops on the edge of the second cloth. And the loops should be opposite one another. I'm not sure what's happened to the translation here. It's a bit funny, but basically you have two strips of fabric. They need to connect. So the verse just tells you, make sure that the loops match up. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard problem tying them together. So make sure that all the loops are congruent. Very inspiring. I know, you're all blown away. It's magical. Hang on there. We're not done. So see Rashi. Rashi on this Pesach, he explains, he's the commentator, he explains, I'll tell you what it means. He says, Shemar, make sure, this is source number 6, make sure that you make the loops congruently so that when you lay them next to one another, the loops on one curtain match up with the corresponding loops on the second fabric. And this is the meaning of the expression makbilos. The Pesach uses the word, see if I can highlight it over here, makbilos, right? The Pesach uses the word makbilos. So Rashi says, what does it mean? He says, makbilos means that they should be opposite one another. And he brings onkelos. The translation of onkelos of the word neged is lekabel, meaning to accept, which means that we're going to have the loops of the fabric keneged one another. Now, the word keneged usually means opposite, but Rashi very accurately has brought the onkelos here, who says that the word keneged in this context doesn't necessarily mean opposite, meaning in opposition to or at odds with. It means that these loops are opposite each other in order to be able to connect, meaning the word keneged can mean opposite, but it can also mean to move to accommodate. It can mean to move to be able to accept, just like two loops can be opposite each other, but really work together, accept each other, and create a really creative force. Why is this so powerful? And it starts with a joke my dad told me. Get this. He said, there was once a man who came to church, and he was dressed as a cowboy. And he sat there with his toy gun and his boots and his spurs and his waistcoat and his hat and his whip throughout the whole church service. And the priest who was running the service was, quite predictably a bit annoyed. So after the service, he didn't say anything, but he gave the guy a dirty look. Next week, the guy comes back. This week, he's dressed as a penguin. And the priest is starting to get a bit frustrated. So after the service that the penguin has sat very nicely through, the priest goes up to him. He says, hello, sir, I see you've come this week dressed as a penguin. And I want you to go home and I want you to ask God if he thinks that this is an appropriate way to come dressed to my church. The guy comes back next week, and this week he's dressed as a camel, and he's dressed as a gesunter camel. And he sits throughout the whole service, the camel, very politely, and the priest can barely contain himself. He storms over to the guy the second the service is over. He goes, well, did you go home and ask God if this was an appropriate way to come dressed to my church? And the camel looked at him and said, I actually did ask God. And he said he doesn't know because he's never been here before. And I think this is a tremendously insightful joke. Because remember this joke, remember what we just said, that the word keneged, meaning opposite, can also mean to accept, can mean to move, to accommodate. And look at this line in the Haggadah like you've never seen it before. We say in the Haggadah every year, Keneged arba bonim dibra Torah. And we typically translate this to mean that corresponding 4 sons the Torah speaks about. Echad chacham, one's wise. Echad rasha, one is wicked. Echad tam, one is simple. But echad she'eino di'elishon is one that doesn't know how to ask. But we know now that the word keneged can mean lekabel. It can mean to accept. And so I put it to you that keneged arba bonim refers to the acceptance of 4 sons on Pesach, 4 different types of people. I get so annoyed every year, guys. Every year I get so annoyed because in every illustration of these 4 sons you see, the Chacham, the wise son, is this angelic, can do no evil, golden prodigy of a son. Who says that just because he's wise, he's clever? Sorry, he's good. He's clever, he's intellectual, but you can get a scathing, harsh, abrasive academic. You can get someone who's narrow-minded, who holds himself higher than everyone else because he's got a greater power of intellect. Who says the Chacham is a good son? Who says, and I'll prove it to you, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that one of the most evil people in Tanakh was called wise. The verse states, this is Sanhedrin, the source number 8 here, and Amnon had a friend whose name was Yoinodov, and he was the son of Shimeah, David's brother, and Yoinodov was a very wise man. And Rav Yehuda says, in the name of Rav, a wise man, the Rasha. He was a wicked man. You can be wise and you can be wicked. But guess what? Keneged arba bonim dibra Torah. When it comes to the Seder table, these are the knights of the round table where everyone is accepted. It doesn't matter if you're wicked. It doesn't matter if you're a harsh, scathing intellectual. It doesn't matter if you're simple. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to ask. Everyone is welcome on Pesach. You know, we start off the Haggadah. We start off and we say, Kol dichrin yesev yechol. Anyone who is hungry, come and eat. The only requirement to be welcome at the Pesach table is, do you need something? If you need something, come in. This is freedom. Look at this halacha. There's a minhag that we spoke above about a custom to buy flour for poor people, specifically Pesach, because that's what we do with our freedom. We've faced the dragon. We've moved forwards on eagle's wings. Now what? Look at that joke, that guy who came to church as a camel. Have we used our freedom to just superficially exclude people? Have we used our freedom and just watched other people take that slot of slavery that we have just left? That's not freedom. Our freedom includes everyone. That's what we do with our freedom. It's the freedom not to be free. It's the freedom to include. And that camel who said to the priest that God has never been to this church, I suspect that God's never been to a church where they mutually exclude people. Sorry, where they superficially exclude people. God says, you want to exclude people? I'm the first out the door. You want to be free? Make sure everyone's free. Keneged arba bonim divra Torah means accept all these types of children, all these types of people at Pesach. So yeah, I've jumped the gun a little bit. But Kol dichvin yesev yechol, as we said, that anyone's welcome at the Seder. Everyone's welcome. These are the knights of the round table. So these, for me, are 3 integral, imperative stages of freedom. It's number 1, face the dragon. Face those boundaries that you thought were impossible to break and watch them waver away. Watch them disappear and melt away in face of your newfound freedom this Pesach. And let it go. There are things that are burdening you down. Pesach, Nisan, the month of freedom, allows you to be free from your former self. And if there are things that are holding you back, you can let them go in the month of Nisan. I challenge you, folks. I challenge you. Think of something that maybe you've been holding on to for too long. Maybe something that you think it's time to let go of. It's not productive anymore. Let it go and become free. And stage 3, the Knights of the Round Table, our freedom doesn't exclude anyone. Our freedom has no bounds and it has no boundaries. Everyone is welcome at the Seder table because that's what freedom is to a Jew. And I think to wrap things off, I think we're going to look at just one little cryptic verse that maybe gets misrepresented in the Haggadah. And it was brought home to me by one of the most powerful stories I've ever heard. But look at this with me, folks. Source number 10 It says here, and we say this, and we're going to recognize it. Anyone who's done a Seder will recognize these words. We say the beginning of Magid, Hoshata Hocha L'Shana Haba B'Arad Yisrael. Nowadays we're here, but next year we're going to be in the land of Israel. Hoshata Avdei, and now we're servants. L'Shana Haba B'nei Chorim, and next year we're going to be free. Now, we have grown up and always understood this to mean Hoshata Hocha. Now we're here and things aren't so great. But L'Shana Haba B'Arad Yisrael, and next year things are going to get better. Don't worry about it. And Hoshata Avdi, and now we're servants, and that's kind of a bit of a damper on things. But don't worry, L'Shana Haba B'nei Chorim. Next year we're going to be free. Things are on the up. Don't worry. It seems that this isn't true. Pesach in our world is synonymous with family gathering, celebration, and of course food. But Pesach in the concentration camps was synonymous with none of these. I mean, for those who actually knew it was Pesach, maybe they could scrape together a few grams of flour and bake them over twigs and eat the matzah, but Pesach had nothing to do with family, food, or freedom in those years in Europe. And Rabbi Rosenfeld was a survivor of one of the camps. And he says how one Pesach, a guard who somehow found out that it was the festival of freedom for this Jewish nation, and knowing that he was a rabbi as well, he brought him up and assembled his bunkmates. He said, "Go on, Rabbi, it's your festival of freedom. Talk to your people about freedom." And Rabbi Rosenfeld in his book recounts how he's looking around this gray, dead, lifeless world. And he just thinks to himself, how on earth am I supposed to speak to my Jewish nation about freedom in these circumstances? And he says that suddenly he found himself talking. And he said, we say every year at the Seder, Hoshata Hocha, now we're here, L'Shana Haba B'Arad Yisrael, and next year we're going to be free. And he said, we think that Hoshata Hocha, now we're here, is a language of despondency, that things are so terrible, but don't worry, next year things are going to get better. He says it's not true. That whole message in its entirety is a message of hope. It's Hoshata Hocha. We're still here. Look what we've been through. Look at the enormous tragedy, the pain, the suffering that we've been through. But Hoshata Hocha, we're still here. And don't worry, L'Shana Haba B'Arad Yisrael. Next year, it's only going to be here. And it might be through tear-filled eyes and gritted teeth that we say Hoshata Hocha, but we say it with a note of hope. It's no matter what we've been through, we're an indestructible nation, a nation that will never die. And take hope and take courage in those words, Hoshata Hocha. I was always slightly baffled by a peculiar posuk in the Torah, a law surrounding the Korban Pesach. Look at source number 12. We know, source number 11. We say in Shemais that when it comes to the Korban Pesach, b'bayis echad yoichel, you eat it in one house, and you're not allowed to break a bone of the Korban Pesach, of the Pesach offering. Why can't you break a bone of the Pesach offering? What's going on there? And the Ritva explains why. Source number 12. He says, that's a message to the Jewish people, because it's true that Jewish people were devoured and eaten and maybe even put through incredible pain by the Egyptians. But the Jewish people never broke. And take heart in that suffering Jewish people, because it doesn't matter, or it does matter that you went through so much pain, but you never ever broke. Says the Ritva, don't break the bones, as a reminder that the Jewish people were never, are never, and never will be broken. It's no coincidence that the first day of Pesach always falls on the same day of the week as Tisha B'Av. And what do we think as we sit there on Tisha B'Av, thinking back to Pesach and reading through all the tragedies that happened to the Jewish people? What do we think? I put it to you that on Tisha B'Av and on Pesach, the same message rings true. We don't look back at the dark, miserable tunnel that the Jewish people have suffered through and look forward to see no glimpse of hope. We take pride, and the misery and the tears and the bitterness cheer us on. And they say, onward, Jewish people, onward throughout all the suffering. Hoshata Hocha, you're still here. And don't worry, L'Shana Haba B'Arad Yisrael. There is an end. There is an end to all the pain and the suffering. And that's coming soon. That's why we say, don't break the bones on Pesach. That's why we say Hoshat HaHacha. It's a message of hope to the Jewish people, that despite all the suffering, every generation we say in Haggadah, there are those who stand up to try and destroy us. And what an empowering idea that is. It's at the surface so miserable and so depressing that we'll never be free from the suffering. But the bottom line is, when we take it a little bit further, look a little bit deeper, how empowering is that? That every generation of the Jewish existence has had people trying to destroy it. And Hoshat HaHacha is our story told by a museum, by broken pots of an archaeological dig. Are we reduced, relegated to the dusty annals of time? And no, we're still here. We're still telling our story. We might still be suffering, but Hoshat HaHacha, and it's never, ever going to be a Jewish nation that dies. It's never a Jewish nation that's broken. Hoshat HaHacha, L'shana haba ba'arad Yisrael. Wishing you a free, truly free Pesach, the freedom to break forward from your struggles, break forward from your past selves, to have the freedom to include everyone and to remember that no matter what happens, even if, God forbid, Mashiach doesn't come this year, I promise you there'll be a Seder next year, there'll be a Jewish nation next year, because we are a nation that just refuses to die. Happy Pesach.